The European tour began in June. Paris,
Berlin, Amsterdam,
London, cities that Emery had only ever seen in movies before. Now he was standing on stage there, singing in front of hundreds of people, sometimes even thousands. At first, we still talked regularly. Emery would send me photos from the cities, the old streets of Paris, the small cafes in Rome. One time, he video called me from the balcony of his hotel in Barcelona. "Look at this," Emery said, turning the camera. The blue ocean stretched out behind him. "I wish you were here." "I do too." But over time, those calls started to become less frequent. Not because Emery didn't want to, but because the tour schedule was getting heavier. Traveling, interviews, recording, performances, and Julian was always by his side. One August evening, I was working in my office in Manhattan when my phone vibrated. Emery was video calling. It was around 3 a.m. in Europe. I picked up. "Hey!" Emery was sitting on the floor of his hotel room. His hair was messy. He was wearing an oversized hoodie. He looked not okay. "Callan, are you okay?" Emery didn't answer right away. He just stared at the screen for a few seconds. Then he said, "I need to talk to you." My heart tightened. I knew that tone. The tone of someone about to say something difficult. "Okay," I said. "What is it?" Emery took a deep breath. "Do you remember when we talked about how sometimes love isn't enough?" "Yeah. I think I'm starting to understand that." The room around me suddenly felt colder. "Emery, listen to me first." He looked down at the floor. "This tour has changed a lot of things. I've met a lot of people. Lots of opportunities. Paths I never thought I'd take." I swallowed hard. "And," Emery closed his eyes for a second, "when you're this far away for so long, you start to realize you're living two different lives." I knew what was coming, but I still hoped I was wrong. "Emery, what are you saying?" He looked straight into the camera. "Julian and I." The sentence hung there. I felt my heart drop. "We kissed." I didn't say anything for a few seconds. Not because I had nothing to say, but because my brain hadn't processed it yet. "When did that happen?" I asked. My voice sounded foreign to me. "Last week."
in Berlin.
The Manhattan room suddenly became too quiet. "Just once?" I asked. Emery didn't answer immediately. That was the answer. I turned my face away from the screen. "Callan, why are you telling me this?" "Because I don't want to lie to you." I let out a dry laugh. "How thoughtful. Don't do that." "Do what?" "Make me the only bad guy here." I turned back to look at him. "Emery, you kissed someone else." "I know. We've been together for almost 8 years." "I know." Emery's voice cracked. "Do you think I don't know that?" He ran a hand through his hair. "I hate myself for this." "Then why did you do it?" Emery was silent. Finally, he said the thing I feared most. "Because when I'm with him, I feel like I belong there." That sentence hurt more than the kiss itself, because it meant there was a world where I was no longer the center. "What about me?" I asked. Emery looked at me. "You're still important." "Still important?" "I love you, Callan." "But," he closed his eyes. "But I've started to feel something for him too." The room stayed silent for a long time. Finally, I said, "What do you want?" Emery looked at me like the question wasn't easy to answer. "I don't know. I need time." I nodded slowly. "So this is where we stop?" "No." Emery said immediately. "I don't want to lose you." "But you don't want to lose him either." He didn't deny it, and that was the clearest answer. The call ended not long after. There was no beautiful goodbye.
No promises.
Just two people staring at each other through the screen, realizing that 10 years of love could crumble so quickly. That night, I walked through Brooklyn for hours. The city was still noisy as always. Taxis drove by. People laughed and talked. Life went on. But in my head, there was only one question. Had I lost the 10-year gamble in the end? But what I didn't know was that Emery was also standing in front of a choice that would decide whether our story ended here or whether it was only just beginning its final chapter. 3 weeks after that call, Emery and I barely talked. Not because we had completely cut each other off. It was just that every message had become short, careful, distant. How was the show today? Good. Have you slept yet? Not yet. Conversations that used to last for hours, now only a few lines. One September morning, I woke up and saw Emery's name on my phone screen. A message. Emery, can we talk? I stared at those words for a long time, then replied. When? The reply came almost instantly. Emery, now. I video called him. Emery picked up after a few seconds. He was at the airport. I could see the flight screens behind him. Where are you?
Amsterdam.
The tour hasn't ended yet? Not yet. Emery looked at me for a moment. I talked to Julian. My throat went dry. And he took a deep breath. We decided to stop. I blinked. Stop? Yeah. Why? Emery looked out the airport window for a second before answering. Because he asked me a question. What question? He turned back to the screen. He asked, if Callan called you right now and told you to come back, what would you do? I didn't say anything. Emery smiled faintly. 1 second later, I had already answered. I would get on a plane immediately. My heart pounded harder. And what did Julian say? Emery shrugged. He said then he already had his answer. A silence fell between us. Finally, I asked the most important thing. So now what? Emery looked at the departure board behind him. The flight to New York takes off in 2 hours. Took me a few seconds to understand. You are coming back? Yeah. What about the tour? I'll go back in a few days. But before that, Emery looked straight at me. I need to see you. 6 hours later, I stood in the arrivals area of JFK Airport. People walked back and forth. Suitcases rolled across the floor. Flight announcements played steadily. I had never felt 6 hours last so long. Then finally, the doors opened. Passengers started coming out. And I saw him, Emery, black coat, backpack on his shoulder. His hair a little longer than the last time I saw him. He looked around, until our eyes met. In that moment, everything seemed to stop. Emery walked toward me, slowly, without saying a word. We stood about a meter apart, close, but there was still distance. Hi, Emery said. Another silence. Then Emery smiled softly. We're really bad at these kinds of moments, aren't we? I exhaled. Yeah. He looked down at the floor for a second. Callan.
I'm sorry.
For what? Everything. I hurt you. I nodded. Yeah. Emery swallowed. But I also realized something. What? He looked at me. For a long time. In all the places I've been, in all the people I've met, there was nowhere that felt like home. Until I thought about you. My heart ached, but it also warmed. I'm not perfect, Emery continued. I doubted. I got a little lost. But there's one thing I'm sure of. He took another step closer. The distance between us almost disappeared. I want to come back. Not because I'm afraid of losing you. Not because I feel guilty. Emery looked straight into my eyes. But because I still love you. The real question still remained. I asked slowly. What about Julian? Emery shook his head. He was a chapter. You are the whole book. I let out a small laugh. That line is really cheesy. Yeah, Emery said. But it's true. We stood there for a few seconds. Then Emery asked quietly, can we start over? Not from the beginning. Just continue. I looked at him, the person I had loved for nearly 10 years, the person who had just shattered my heart, and the only person who could fix it. Finally, I said, Emery, yeah, this time. Don't make me wait at the airport again. Emery smiled. Deal. Then he pulled me into a hug. In the middle of the crowded airport, amid the announcements and rolling suitcases. After nearly 10 years, we had found each other again. But we both knew, love didn't end with a hug. started again from there, and the next chapter would be harder than any before it. Winter came to New York quickly. November, cold winds swept through the streets of Manhattan. Stores began hanging lights for the holiday season. After Emery returned to Europe to finish the tour, my life went back to its old rhythm. But this time, there was a difference. We talked every day. Not the short messages like before, but long calls, real conversations, sometimes difficult ones. One night, Emery video called from the dressing room after a show in Prague. "I just messed up a high note," he laughed. "Did the audience notice? Probably not. Then it's fine." Emery looked at me for a while. "You know, before, I always thought I had to choose." "Choose what? Music or you?" I frowned. "Emery, I never asked you to choose." "I know," he nodded. "But in my head, it always felt like that." He looked down at the guitar beside him. "Now I think I was wrong." The tour ended at the end of December. The night before Emery flew back to New York, he sent me a message. "Let's have dinner tomorrow. There's something I want to tell you." That message made me a little nervous. Something I want to tell you was rarely a good opening. The next evening, we met at a small restaurant in Brooklyn. Place that wasn't too crowded.
No paparazzi.
No fans. Just us. Emery arrived before me. He was sitting at a corner table when I walked in. Gray knitted coat. Hair a little long. He smiled when he saw me. Hey! We ordered food, but neither of us really touched it. Finally, Emery put down his fork. "Callan." "Yeah. I've been thinking a lot during this tour." I nodded. "About us." And Emery took a deep breath. "Over the past 10 years, my life has changed so much. I became the person I once dreamed of being. But there's one thing that hasn't changed." He looked at me. "I still want you there." He took a small box out of his coat pocket. My heart skipped a beat. "Emery, wait. Let me finish." He smiled nervously. "This isn't some grand proposal."
No vauelins. No flasmav.
"Thank God," I said. Emery laughed. "But it's real." He opened the box. A simple silver ring. Not too flashy, but beautiful. "Callan Hayes," Emery said. "You were with me when I was just a boy with a cheap guitar. You believed in me before anyone else did. I hurt you. I made mistakes. But if you're still here," he swallowed hard, "I want to spend the rest of my life doing the right thing." The entire restaurant seemed to go quiet. There was only the sound of my heartbeat. "So," Emery said softly, "will you marry me?" I looked at the ring, then at Emery. 10 years. The poor nights. The tours. The fights. The times we almost lost each other. Our love had never been perfect, but it had always been real. I breathed out slowly. "Emery." "Yeah. I have one condition." He frowned. "A condition?" "Yeah. From now on, if you ever write a song about me, make it a little less cheesy." Emery laughed loudly. "Can't promise that. Then I'll have to think again. Don't threaten me." I took the ring out of the box, slipped it on my finger, then looked at him. "The answer is yes." Emery stood up abruptly. He hugged me so tightly I could barely breathe. A few people in the restaurant started clapping. Someone whistled. I laughed. "We just became the cheesiest couple in Brooklyn." Emery shrugged. "Worth it." A few months later, on a spring afternoon in Central Park, Emery stood on a small stage, just him and his guitar. A small crowd gathered around. He looked at me in the crowd, then spoke into the microphone. "This song is for the person who taught me that sometimes love isn't a gamble. It's a decision." He began to play, and for the first time I heard the song. The song titled 10 Years.